So in March, Jared Ediger and I, Jared is a member here at St. Luke's. We went through Storyline together. He's actually one of our Storyline facilitators with his wife, Sue Ann, this fall. Anyway, we were at the Storyline conference in San Diego in March. And each evening while there, we ended the day with going down to the hotel hot tubs outside surrounded by palm trees. And when we did this, we met the most interesting people. And so our last night there was much the same. We met some really interesting people. One of the ladies we were talking to began sharing her story with us, and we were sharing our stories with her. And she said that she was a hairstylist. And she moved on in her story, but as she's moving on, she's doing so with a lot of hesitancy. You could tell she was holding something back. There was something she kind of wanted to say but wasn't saying it. So as time passed, she said, well, it's not just that I'm a hairdresser, I'm a house mom. I had the same look you did. I looked at Jared, Jared looked at me. We didn't know what a house mom was, so we asked the question, do tell, what exactly is a house mom? And again, with some hesitancy, she said, well, I look over the girls at a local strip club. And when she talked about her job, she didn't talk about it like a job. She actually talked about it in some really profound ways. I should tell you, this woman is Christian, and she takes her faith very seriously. And she said things like, these girls, some of them are the most hurting and broken people, and I get to be with them. And she said things like, when these girls want a hot meal, they know where to come. My home is always open, and we've shared a lot of meals together. And she said things like, I pray for them all the time, and sometimes they even ask me to pray for them. She talked about them like they were her daughters. And as I left this conversation, I'm thinking a couple of things. I wonder how many times she's encountered judgment and condemnation, maybe from pastors or religious leaders or churchgoers. And then I got to thinking, I wonder also if she's exactly where God wants her to be. And I get it, right? It gets complicated. Because you may be thinking to yourself, wait a minute, Ryan, strip clubs. Come on, this is the place where girls are objectified. They're treated like objects, and this is the place where men go and just prey upon these young girls. I get it. It's complicated. But the more people that I encounter, the more stories that I hear, the more I see that some of us have really complicated stories. Like, we don't always have clear answers. Our next moves, our next steps aren't always clear. Some of us haven't heard this booming voice from the clouds come down and tell us exactly where to go and exactly what to do. Things get complicated. And so I want to turn to a story in 2 Kings. It is one of my favorite Bible stories. It has to do with many complications and how these things are handled. So a little background on this story, because we're starting late in chapter 5. We're going to start at verse 9. A little history. Naaman is the central character in the story. Naaman is a military general, high up there, high on social status, right next to the king. He's a man of power and privilege and all sorts of money, but here's the thing. Naaman has a skin disease. And you say, well, why is this so significant? Because if you had a skin disease in the ancient world, it was said that either you or someone in your family did something really, really bad, and this was the God's way of punishing you. So this person with the skin disease would have been excluded and marginalized. Now Naaman, he was willing to do anything to get rid of this skin disease. So he hears through the grapevine that he should travel down into Israel. Not exactly friends, Aram and Israel. Naaman is from Aram. And by the way, another context here. This is during the time of localized deities. They were under the understanding of that each land had their own god. The god of Aram was Raman. The god of Israel, Yahweh, the Lord. So he hears that he should go down into Israel. He takes tons and tons of money with him and chariots and horses and other men. And here's where the story picks up. He encounters the prophet Elisha in Israel. Naaman arrived with his horses and chariots. He stopped at the door of Elisha's house. Elisha sent out a messenger who said, "Go and wash 7 times in the Jordan River. Then your skin will be restored and become clean." But Naaman went away in anger. He said, "I thought for sure that he'd come out, stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the bad spot and cure the skin disease. Aren't the rivers in Damascus," so in other words, aren't the rivers back home, the Abanah, the Pharpar, better than all Israel's waters? Couldn't I wash in them and get clean? So he turned away and proceeded to leave in anger. Naaman's servants came up to him and spoke to him, "Father, if the prophet had told you to do something difficult, wouldn't you have done it? All he said to you was, 'Wash and become clean.'" So Naaman went down and bathed in the Jordan 7 times, just as a man of God had said. His skin was restored like that of a young boy, and he became clean. He returned to the man of God with all his attendants. He came and stood before Elisha, saying, "Now I know for certain that there's no God anywhere on earth except in Israel. But may the Lord forgive your servant for this one thing." And this is what the story hinges on. "When my master comes into Ramon's temple to bow down there and is leaning on my arm, I must also bow down in Ramon's temple. And when I do bow down in Ramon's temple, may the Lord forgive your servant for doing that." Let me recap for you what has just happened. Naaman, for whatever reason, was not healed by the god Ramon. Naaman travels into Israel and encounters Yahweh, the Lord. Something happened in these waters. Whatever it was profound enough, it was significant enough for Naaman to come out and find Elijah and say, "I get it. This is God. Not only am I recognizing this deity, but there are no other deities. This is God of all the earth." And then he says to Elijah, "But Elijah, you have to understand something here. You see, I've got to go back home. And when I do, things are going to get really complicated really quickly. You see, everyone has to go into Ramon's temple, and I'll be next to my boss, the king. And when he bows down to the god Ramon, I too will have to bow down. Will this God whom I just encountered, will this God forgive me for this? Will this God go with me in my story?" So Elisha responds, "No. Naaman, you can't have it both ways. It's either this God or that God, but you can't have them both. Choose this day whom you will serve. You are either for us or you're against us." Actually, that's not how Elisha responds. Elisha responds in verse 19 with some of the most beautiful and profound words in all of Scripture. 3 short words. Elisha said to him, "Go in peace." Can you imagine Naaman's response here? "Elisha, I'm not sure you just heard me. I just had this experience with God in these waters, and I know this is God, but the thing is, I got to go home and bow down to this other God." And maybe Elisha says, "Yeah, I get it. What do you want from me? You want an answer? You want me to tell you not to go? You want me to tell you you're wrong? You want me to give you an easy way out? No. Go in peace. God goes with you. Isn't what happened in these waters enough? Can you rest in that? Can you find peace in that?" Go in peace. They're healing words. They're restoring words. They're words of shalom. Some of you have had really complicated stories. And for some of you, these complications may be holding your story back. You might say to yourself, "Geez, I gotta, it's easy here at church on a Sunday morning, but the truth is I gotta go to work tomorrow. And my job, it just puts me in these ethically challenging situations, and I don't always know the right answers. I don't know if what I'm doing is the right thing." Or maybe you say, geez, when I look at my story, somewhere along the way, things just got messy. And relationships are really messy, and I'm not exactly sure where to put them and what to do with them and how to move forward in them. Things got messy. Do you believe that God goes with you in the mess? In my childhood, some really complicated things happened. When I was 5 years old, I have my first turn. I open up my timeline, and my first turn is at the age of 5, and it's a negative turn, actually. And it's when my parents divorced. And you might be thinking to yourself, hold on here, 50% or more of all couples divorce. Why is this such a big deal? Well, my parents' divorce for many, many years was really, really ugly. And for lots and lots of years, relationships were really, really complicated. And the thing is, I didn't really know how to talk about this because my fear was if I talked about this with you, you wouldn't understand. It was too messy. I can't explain it. And what if you were to minimalize it? That might create even more pain. So you just kind of hold this stuff in and you just deal with it. And I didn't know where to put some of these relationships, some of these really, really complicated relationships. I didn't know how to think about them, where to put them. Example. For lots and lots of years, I absolutely dreaded Father's Day. Because I had my dad, whom I loved, and I had my stepdad, whom I also loved. But in my mind, I couldn't honor them both. To do so, it just was like tearing of my allegiances and tearing of where my loyalty was. And so for lots and lots of years, I just gave up on the Father's Day project. And still to this day, even if you and I were to sit down for hours, I'm not sure I could talk about all of these complications. I'm not sure you would be able to make sense of it. I'm not sure you would even know what to do with it. But in the same breath, I tell you, I know how to talk about the power of simple yet profound blessings. In May, Tammy and I and the girls, we went to Florida. And we were visiting my mom and my stepdad, Rob. And we were actually there on our anniversary. And, whoo, that was a slip. Our anniversary, whom I love so dearly. And we woke up on that morning to find this card from my parents. And I just wanted to share it with you. I actually carry this card with me. It stays in my bag. Because I'm a big fan of carrying around little blessings because they remind us of our story. Rob said, "I'm so happy to see and be a part of your beautiful little family. You guys are doing a fantastic job. I love the moments we get to share with you. Love, Rob." And he actually picked this card out during that Moment series that we were doing here at St. Luke's. But pretty simple words, right? Then my mom wrote below, "Couldn't agree with Rob more. When you two look back through your years together, it will be moments that you remember. The moment Ryan asked you to marry him. The moment you found a new life with the little Selah and what she would add to your family. The moment you knew an offer on a home was accepted. New careers, new moments make a journey, and God goes with you on this journey. I love watching both of you together with your babies. You are great parents, providing a healthy married life for your babies to grow up in. I love you, Mom." Nothing really profound about that. Pretty simple. But sometimes in our stories, if you're like me, you enter into new things, you get into new phases in life, and you start asking those big questions. Man, am I doing this right? Like as a father, as a parent, am I doing this right? Because it seems like I make a lot of mistakes. And as a husband, I begin to ask, am I doing this whole marriage thing right? Are we doing this right? And those simple and profound little blessings come along. Those people come along to us and they say, yeah, keep doing it. You're actually doing it. Just keep going. And remember that God goes with you. You're doing it. And it's like when we're teaching Selah to ride her bike this summer. She would get on, her helmet on, begin pedaling, and she would always look back and say, "Poppy, am I doing it? Am I doing it?" And we say, yes, baby, you're doing it. Keep doing it. You're doing this great job. And sometimes Selah, because she took too sharp of a turn or she ran into something, sometimes she would tip over and fall off her bike. And every time me or Mama go to Selah and we pick her up and put her back on the bike, and we say, you're doing it again, those people come along to us. Those simple yet profound blessings come to us right when we fall on our faces, and they pick us up. And they say, you can do it again and again and again. You're doing it. Keep doing it. You see, we all need these simple yet profound blessings to come to us. We need one another. You need to not only hear these words, but to offer these words. Because these blessings, they give us new life, and they sustain us. I want to invite Paul Kirk to come forward. Paul is our courageous storyteller this morning. I had the privilege and honor of being doing a storyline group with Paul over the summer. If you don't know Paul, you'll want to get to know Paul. He's a really good guy. When we were starting storyline on that second week, when we're sharing our stories, he said this. He said, I've never shared my story like this with anybody. And his wife, Stephanie's sitting next to him. And she says, well, except for me, honey. And he says, no, not even you, not in this way, in this order. And so you know when Paul speaks, it's going to be like wise words, and you want to listen, and you want to hear what he has to say. So, Paul, do tell us. We've talked about those go in peace moments, those little blessings. How have you experienced those go in peace moments in your story?
Absolutely. So I think it goes back just like you, Ryan, and Naaman too, for that matter. There's a lot of complexity to the story, so you need that context behind it to really get the power of that go in peace moment. For me, it was my childhood. Like you, when I was about 9 years old, my father left the family, just went ahead and left. So dealing with divorce in that way as well, obviously it wasn't a pretty situation. As a result, my mother turned to alcohol as a way to deal with it, as well as try to get some power over her story, over her life. And as a result of that, it affected me, my sisters, myself, in the sense that any semblance of a normal childhood was gone. On top of a lack of confidence and perceived self-worth, on top of having my father go away, all these things happening in my family, just being something that was completely overwhelming, so complex that as a child I couldn't understand that. To be honest, I didn't understand it necessarily until I left my house. And as I was growing up, my friends invited me to go to church, and that's how I started this relationship with God and the faith community. And as a result of that, I met a man named Larry, and he took me under his wing. He offered me in my sophomore year of high school an opportunity to hang drywall. He's an independent contractor. So that taught me the value of hard work and the importance of going to college and finding a job that wasn't hanging drywall. But more importantly, he became a mentor to me. He, listening to Caleb all day, having great conversations with him, really taught me a lot of becoming a man of faith, of becoming a Christian man. It came to the point going into my senior year of high school, this is a turning point in my life, this go in peace moment happened. I was at church just like any other Sunday. At the end of church, he took me aside. It was a week before he was leaving for Honduras for a year-long mission trip, and just talked about how proud he was of how much he'd seen me grow over the previous 2 years, the Christian I'd become, the relationship I developed with him and with God. And then on top of that, and I'll never forget this, it still impacts me today, he told me that it's been amazing to watch you grow in your faith, to learn about God. You're in an amazing opportunity now where you can start teaching other people about God and sharing your beliefs and sharing your relationship with God with others. And that has affirmed me up until this day. That was a real turning point.
Yeah, those simple blessings come along and propel us to live better stories. Tell us, you're not one to maybe in the past naturally share your story, but tell us, how did you experience freedom in that act of sharing your story?
Right. Obviously, that's pretty fresh to me since I never told the right order or whatnot. But at the end of the day, it's through telling the story, it's absolutely liberating in the sense that the amount of vulnerability you put into it and sharing those details of your life with other people gives them the opportunity to give you those go in peace moments, to tell you, it's all right, let it be, go in peace. It is what it is. It's complicating, but we love you, we support you. So the affirmation that comes from that is crucial, it's invaluable. So I'll never forget when I told you the story and storyline, how nervous I was going into it, but after the 40 minutes, however long it took me to go through everything, how affirmed and how loved I felt.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Paul.